guys, it's Oshin here. Welcome back to the Bottom Bins. So today we're going to be continuing our transfer videos and we're going to be looking at the best loan signing in the Premier League history in our opinions. So we've looked at a couple of different things in the last couple of videos, our best signing, our worst signing. So today, like I said, the loan signing, and we're going to kick it off with Connor then, if you wouldn't mind giving us your opinion.
Yeah, so my best loan signing in the Premier League, Oshin, I think when I remember back to this particular season, it reminds me a lot of like peak football. Like FIFA 13 was the game at the time. That's my favourite ever FIFA. It was the last time Manchester United ever won the Premier League, and that's probably one of my favourite Man United teams ever. One of my favourite Man United jerseys was the T-Towel at the time. So I get a lot of nostalgia when I think back to this season. So the player I went for was Romelu Lukaku, his loan from Chelsea to West Brom during this season. So Lukaku really had a breakout campaign this year. He was a relative unknown. We hadn't really heard a lot about Romelu Lukaku other than maybe what we seen back. I don't know if you remember like the old 442 magazine or like Shoot or something, when they always used to count down like the best wonder kids in world football. And I remember when Lukaku signed, the front cover of that edition of like 442 mag was literally a picture of Lukaku, and it was like the next golden generation striker. And it always stuck with me, and I always remember his breakout season because he had the dreadlocks in the hair.
Yeah.
He was actually quite slim back then as well. He was very athletic, very powerful, very fast. Not like the Lukaku that we know today. However, in this season for West Brom, it was their highest ever Premier League finish, and in 34 games, Romelu Lukaku scored 17 goals. Like, I think for a relative unknown, a player who was under the age of 21, to come in his first season in the Premier League and bang 17 goals, to me, I don't think the debate's close, lads. I think already with my pick, I think I might have won it.
I think it's funny you say that because we're talking about our other videos. The worst signing in Premier League history was Oran's, and again that's more recent, so it's actually funny to see the different comparisons to maybe Lukaku, like you said, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's one of them ones where it's hard to disagree with your opinion as well. 17 goals for a player at that age coming into a West Brom team who, I mean, obviously weren't anything special, getting their highest Premier League finish, which was solely down to Lukaku's 17 goals. So he single-handedly dragged them at that age in the Premier League. It's very hard to do. So I've actually went with Robbie Keane. So his loan move from Inter Milan to Leeds in 2000, he came in the January transfer window and scored 9 goals in 14 games. The reason why I think it's the best signing in Premier League history is because it was one of Leeds' best ever seasons. They got beat in the semi-final of the Champions League that season. They came fourth, just a couple of points short of another Champions League finish. So I think at that sort of stage, Leeds again were obviously a very important club and a big club back then, but it was one of the moves that I think sort of kicked Robbie Keane's career off again, because he went to Inter Milan, played I think maybe 6 games before the before the January transfer window, sorry. So it was one of the moves where he could have maybe died off. So when we're talking about obviously the help he gave to the team to finish that season so strongly and have such a memorable season, I think when you look at his career though individually, if he sat on the bench for Inter for the rest of that season, God knows where he could have went in the summer. Like, he mightn't have got a move to a club as big as Leeds at the time, or again, like I said, kick-started his career again to bigger and better things after that. So it's one of them ones where I think when you're talking about the Premier League and 2000 is a different stage than when Lukaku had his season. So it's a hard one to call. Yes, Robbie Keane's was 9 goals, whereas Lukaku's was 17 goals, which are both very good in the Premier League for the short amount of games that Robbie Keane played in comparison to Lukaku's season. But when you talk about going far in the Champions League and finishing top 4 and stuff, like at that time with a very, very competitive league with the likes of Arsenal, United, or Chelsea, sorry, all them other teams who were doing so well at them sort of stages, for Leeds to be finishing that high, I think he really helped their season. And then personally, his individual career kind of went downhill. He sort of revitalised it with that half a season with Leeds, so that's the reason why I went for that.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Oran, what about yourself then? Best loan signing?
Yeah, so again, I've kind of went more recent. I've went with Jesse Lingard to West Ham from Manchester United. So, look, Jesse Lingard was coming off a bit of a wishy-washy season and spell at Manchester United, if we're being totally honest. You know, he had a few good times in a Man United shirt. I typically remember when we won the FA Cup and he scored a worldie. straight after Alan Pardew hit a very famous dance, which I'll put the clip in here. But he went to West Ham in January of the 2021-22 season. And again, he didn't have a full season like Lukaku did, but he made a brilliant impact in the short period of time that he was there. He scored 9 goals and had 4 assists in the 16 games he played for West Ham. You know, they weren't doing necessarily amazing, but he came in and revitalised that team. It was almost like a weight had lifted off their shoulders, and there was new energy into the squad. And, you know, his impact and his contributions ended up getting them Europa League football. You know, unfortunately, he didn't stay at West Ham, but the following year they did get into the semi-final of that Europa League, where they were knocked out by Frankfurt. But he scored 2 goals on his debut in a 3-1 win versus Aston Villa. And then I think everybody will remember, and again I'll clip it, an amazing goal versus Wolves, where he carried the ball 52 yards before slotting it past Rui Patricio. It looked like Jesse Lingard had finally, you know, reached the potential that he was destined to reach in the Premier League, and it looked like he had found his home in the Premier League. But if we're being completely honest, he let himself down at the end of that season. He was released by Manchester United on a free transfer, and he decided to join Nottingham Forest for a lot of money, and it didn't work out for anybody, and now he's playing in Korea at FC Seoul, where he is the captain. And it just, you know, it's a shame to see someone like that, you know, flourish so well at a squad like West Ham. Was wanted by West Ham so heavily, the fans wanted him, and yeah, it just didn't work out for him. But in terms of impact, in terms of loan signings, I think it's hard to look past Jesse Lingard to West Ham.
Yeah, it's a bit funny, you know, these 3 particular signings. You know, Oran, yours with Jesse Lingard, you know, didn't go on to sign for West Ham. Mine with Lukaku didn't go on to sign for West Brom. You know, and I think in those 2 cases in particular, you know, Lingard went back to Manchester United, and you know Manchester United had quite high hopes for Jesse Lingard, and you know the expectation was that he was going to come back to United and that he was going to be a breath of fresh air to that particular Manchester United squad. And you know it just for one reason or another it didn't quite end up happening, and you know the career has went downhill since. You know,
but even at the start of that season when he came back, sorry to interrupt you. Even at the start of that season when he came back to United, you know, I remember in Ronaldo's re-debut against Newcastle, you know, Jesse Lingard scored an amazing goal that day.
Yeah.
And, you know, it did look like he had found his feet again. He was ready to take on the Premier League. But,
yeah,
you know, coming back to United at that stage, I don't feel was the right decision for him, because, you know, when you have Bruno Fernandes playing in the same position, and, you know, that was particularly when Bruno Fernandes was among the best midfielders in the world. I know he still is, but like then he was regarded as, you know, maybe the best midfielder in the world. And when he's playing your position, you're never going to get ahead of him. Like,
that's true. And you know, even in my case as well, Oran with Lukaku, you know, he actually went on to sign for Everton that next summer, and obviously went on to have a very successful 3 years on Merseyside. Scored tons of goals, was undoubtedly Everton's best player. You know, made the £75 million move to Manchester United a few seasons after that. Had a great first season, sort of tailed off in the second season, and you know he has kind of been in the land of obscurity ever since. You know, it seems as though Lukaku's career has went in the shape of he has a good season, then a bad season, then a good season, then a mediocre season, then a bad season. You know, it's just not really clicked for him. And I thought, you know, when he was playing for Inter Milan, it looked like he was one of the world's top strikers again. And look, through, you know, his own, as you pointed out in the last video, Warren, through his own personal choices, his own personal preferences, maybe some lifestyle choices as well, you know, it hasn't worked out for him. Whereas with you, Oisín, and with Robbie Keane, you know, he obviously went on to sign for Leeds then in that summer.
Had a very successful career with Leeds and a very successful career afterwards. So, like, you look at, like you said, like where them players ended up now, and I know Lukaku's still playing and still floating around big enough clubs. His performances are saying otherwise. He shouldn't be maybe at them big clubs. Whereas like Robbie Keane sort of did push on, like I said, could have went the complete opposite, staying with Inter, could have run down a contract, could have moved to a lower club, whatever it was. He actually did push on then and has had a very overall successful career, you could say, Robbie Keane had. So it's one of the ones where, like I said in the last couple of videos, we'll probably have 2 or 3 or more honourable mentions of each of them. So it's one of the ones you could just list a few, definitely, to say the least, anyway.
Yeah, 100%. Oran, any honourable mentions for yourself? Thinking particularly of maybe guys that come in, or maybe at middling clubs come in and maybe change the season around.
Yeah, well, one in particular that I remember, and again, very recent. Obviously, I know in the comments people are going to say about Henrik Larsson to Manchester United and stuff like that, but one that sticks in my head, which is very recent, was Joe Willock's move to Newcastle from Arsenal. That was when Newcastle were battling relegation, and I think it was in the last 10 or 12 games Joe Willock got 10 goals, and it warranted a £30 million move then from Arsenal. And no disrespect to Joe Willock, he's a good Premier League midfielder, but nobody expected him to go in and have that impact, especially playing in centre midfield, to get so many goal contributions, and just again, like Lindegaard, just raise that team to a different standard than they were playing that season. So for me, I think Joe Willock definitely deserves a mention there.
Yeah, I know. I think with loan signings, there's always maybe hold on to a bit of hope that this player might come in for 6 months and might completely revolutionise the way that we play or how we look. I think more often than not, a loan signing comes in and doesn't play particularly well and doesn't hit the ground running. For me personally, a loan that I could never understand why Manchester United didn't make permanent was Marcel Sabitzer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Some of the moments he gave, scoring the 2 goals in the Europa League, he was just an absolute general in midfield. Like, I loved everything about Sabitzer. I loved everything about his time at United. And, when he was available for 13 million euros or something that summer, why Manchester United just didn't go and make that transfer permanent. But instead they went and got, another loan deal through, and they got Safi and Amrabat on loan. Who, yes, Oran, I remember me and you particularly having high hopes for Amrabat, but I mean, when you compare the 2 loans now, it's like chalk and cheese. One was a really, really good midfielder, top European quality midfielder, and one was pants. So it's, you're hoping that you find the Sabitzers of the world out there. What about yourself, Ashleen? Any more you can think of?
It's hard to think. Like, I'm just trying to think of players who have made such a massive impact in the league. I think the 3 we've mentioned are probably up there with the highest. Yeah. Like, the ones, even the honourable mentions are, like Willock as well, sort of one I'd forgot about there, but had a massive impact on Newcastle's season that year. And like, you could go on and on about it. I think there is, over the last few seasons, more recently enough, when loans have become more sort of popular rather than a permanent transfer, there has been a quite a few. But I think it's one of them ones where, like you said, you want a player to come in and just revolutionise the club, the season, whatever. And it is very hard for a player to have such a high impact on the club. But there has been a couple of decent ones over the last couple of seasons there, so there has.
I remember in particular, do you remember Remy to Newcastle?
Yeah.
And he scored like 14 goals.
Then got the permanent move to Chelsea,
and just
all downhill.
The career was awful after that. But for that 6 months, like Remy, that was prime Loic Remy. Like, that was 84 overall in FIFA, rare gold card, Loic Remy, and that's the Remy that I will try and remember forever.
Yeah. And you think about Sturridge as well. Like, but like boys like him went out, completely changed their game, were so talked about, come back to the parent club and pants, like you said. You know what I mean?
That's true. So that's true. His loan to Bolton.
Yeah.
He was
unbelievable. So he was
unbelievable. Well, look, I think that's going to do it for this episode, folks. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Our next episode, we will be focusing a wee bit more on players who could have been. And basically what that means is just players that, maybe had a lot of injuries, or maybe career moves just didn't go their way, and they never quite hit the heights that I think everybody in the world thought that they might do. So, look, thank you very much for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, do whatever it is the platform is asking you to do. Thank you for watching, and keep it bottom bins.
Bottom bins.
Bottom bins.